Football for me, it means people. Everyone who's involved for the right reasons. They want to play because they love the game, they want to be involved, and it brings connection between everyone, whether it's standing on the sides, whether it's in the crowd, just watching and not playing.
And with football being for everyone, whether you're a coach, a player, an aspiring player for the future, someone seeking a scholarship, a teacher, a youth worker, a professional, a volunteer, someone seeking to get involved in the game, a volunteer parent, whether they're reflecting on their journey and how they can understand their grassroots team, an aspiring academy coach yourself, no matter what and no matter where you're listening, this podcast is really for you. On the Reflective Coach podcast, there are so many wonderful guests that feature on a podcast, whether this is former professionals, current professionals, and professionals of all backgrounds within the Coaching Insight series that really inspire, understand, support, and are reflective amongst this journey as they share their own insights, experiences, their own journey, their own reflections, strategies, insights, and other stories into the Reflective Coach podcast. Each week features a new guest, and each new guest brings something new to the podcast. I've been so lucky to have so many wonderful guests on, and you can really listen to all the episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and Podcast Addict, with continuous updates on Twitter and LinkedIn. By subscribing, commenting, following, engaging with all the posts amongst social media, you can really keep up to date with all the episodes.
Yeah, no, so I think for me personally, I think I see the game well. I take pride in how, especially I see the in possession side of the game, right? I think that's what I enjoy. That's what I really I enjoy watching. I enjoy diving into studying. I enjoy spending time with other staffs, other coaches, learning from what they do. I spent a good amount of time this winter and spring, working with other staffs and kind of talking through like their teaching processes. Yeah, I 100% wholeheartedly agree. It's one of those where like you've just kind of let them be who they are, and especially like as you said, like when the season gets long, when it starts to you start to go through the ruts, like the start of the year is always so exciting. They're 100%. They're ready to be back at it. Right, at the end of the year, like you're pushing for the conference tournament, you're pushing for the NCAA tournament. Like it's exciting. That middle part of the year can be challenging at times. Right, classes have started, exams have started to kick in. Like, yeah, I think there's always, especially when you look at the periodization, and I think that's the toughest part about the college model is you don't get a lot of opportunity to like really train and teach during the season because so many of your sessions are 60, 75 minutes at most. It's mostly recovery. It's mostly taking care of our kids' bodies and making sure that they're able to play in 2 games. But then as far as the games go, I think you always have there's 2 things, what you plan and then what actually happens.
Not a problem at all.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure's all mine, and I'm great that that you could come on and we could make this happen. So it's always a pleasure to speak to everyone and have you on. But it's going to be great to hear about what you're doing and all the work that you're inputting.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's always fun to, I think, collaborate with others and kind of get to kind of share our stories, our journeys, and obviously all the cool things that we're doing here at EKU and all of that sort of stuff.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And whenever I meet someone new and I get to chat to them, I always love to see what they have behind them. And, I love all the different flags you got behind you. So, there's a few that I recognise. I think, unfortunately, one is an Arsenal one, if I'm getting that right. One's a US one,
Yep.
Portland Timbers. And there's a few there which I don't recognise.
Yeah. So I think let's see what I have. I've got a couple. So the maroon and white one is a small Division III school. And then the orange and black one is my high school actually that I went to, and so those both in a really small town called Elma, Michigan, way up in I guess central Michigan. So and then the second one is from the Guam Football Association. So I'm a part of the API coaches community, the United Soccer Coaches. So my mom's Korean, and so I'm Korean American, obviously. Then and so I've gotten hooked in with the API, the Asian and Pacific Islanders, coaching community with United Soccer Coaches, and have made some pretty cool connections with like the couple of the guys involved with with Guam, especially Ross, who's been super involved with both the men's and the women's side and just the whole federation in general. But one of the years at convention, I think 2 years ago in Kansas City, at our API social, I got the pleasure to win the Guam scarf in a little raffle that we had at our social. So that was a lot of fun. So, but yeah, it is funny. I laugh. You would have had a plain maroon wall 3-4 months ago. I've been here for over a year now and just finally got the scarves and everything up this summer. So it's a work in progress.
I love it though. It's something different. It's nice. It represents all the backgrounds and associations and interests which you have. So I think it's a great collection, but also one that gives a little insight deal without having to introduce yourself straight away to get some sort of feel about who you are and where you've been, sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think you can usually tell a lot about somebody by what's on their wall. So it's kind of fun. I enjoy that.
I love that. Absolutely, for sure. So how's your day been so far?
Yeah, it's good. So our conference, we play Thursdays and Sundays, in kind of our schedule, and so you either play both at home, both away. So this weekend was an away swing. So we went down to Charlotte, North Carolina, to play on Thursday, and then Atlanta, Georgia on Sunday. And so we got home pretty late last night. So it was a slow morning this morning. Kind of it's our one NCAA off day for our players, and so they're off from soccer today. We kind of took a lot of the day, as a work from home as a staff, but I came in, I had a few things to take care of. So slower day, kind of that mental reset, and then get focused on, we've got a really big math on Thursday as far as, conference standings implications go. So kind of right back to focus to get into work again.
And when it comes down to, say, preparing for a Thursday, Sunday schedule in terms of games, do you have then a sort of fixed routine where you look at how you pick players for those games? Do you take it as a flow on the basis of a Sunday, then a Thursday, or Thursday to Sunday? How do you sort of look at that in preparation for your team then?
Yeah, I think there's always, especially when you look at the periodization, and I think that's the toughest part about the college model is, you don't get a lot of opportunity to like really train and teach during the season because so many of your sessions are 60, 75 minutes at most. It's mostly recovery. It's mostly, taking care of our kids' bodies and making sure that they're able to play in 2 games. But then as far as the games go, I think you always have, there's 2 things, what you plan and then what actually happens. And oftentimes they're very different. You go into a Thursday match hoping that, maybe you can score a couple of goals early and get a chance to rest some legs, and then next thing you know, you give up a goal against the run and play, and all of a sudden you're down 1-0 and chasing for 90 minutes, right? So like you never know what's going to happen. But I think for us, we're lucky that we've got a really deep core, and so we've been able through most of the year to play. I think I guess the good thing about the college soccer subbing rules is you can play 22, 24, 26 players a game if you want to, and we've been lucky to be able to do that and keep a lot of our players relatively fresh, playing 50, 60, 70 minutes a game all year versus having, 8 players a game play 90s, which is challenging. And so for us, we kind of take it as a game by game approach. There's always certain players that we know we want to say, hey, like, want to make sure we get them an extra 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, because we know we're going to need to try to push them for 90 maybe on Sunday or vice versa. Like, hey, we're going to push them for 90 on Thursday and know that we can get them 20 minutes of rest on Sunday. It's a challenge, but I think we all try to navigate it as best as we can.
I love that, and I love that you talk about having something in your mind, but then that could always change. But how that pays off as well in terms of those changes and having that mental reset to go with that is an important aspect because players might be limited to 40, 50 minutes dependent on their performance, and you may be forced into a change whereas you wanted to give them 70, 80, for example. But then they might be late on a Sunday night. They've had a long week. That periodization. They're quite built up emotionally, mentally. They got that high fatigue. So then if they're unhappy with that decision, then they're going to be right on a high. Whereas if they have a mental reset day like today, then they can approach you in a fresh mind and conversation tomorrow, having some time to actually go away and take some feedback on board, but also to maybe understand as to why they've come off. So, it does play part in part. And, some people may go, oh, you've just had a day off or mental reset, it's a down day. But actually there's so much more which goes into that psychologically, which is so important where players actually will go away and think on it especially on the back of a late Sunday night, for example.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. And I think it gives them a chance to reflect. It gives them a chance to kind of flush out emotions, flush out like also sometimes like the stress. You know, if you're going 7 days a week for whatever the college season is, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 14 weeks long. You know, that can be a lot on you mentally. It can be exhausting. It can be draining. You know, having those days off, I think, are important. You know, as much as I love to get out and just teach and coach and every single day, like you need that day to flush everything out. And I think it does. It gives them that extra chance too, just to physically recover too, especially when you've got a lot of travel, you know, whether we're flying or whether we're driving on a Sunday, right? Like that's a lot on your legs. Like it's not comfortable to sit and travel for 5-6 hours on a day. So, you know, then asking them to turn around and be ready to train today, it is kind of silly. And like for us, even our, you know, like on when we're away, it's like this week, for example, right? We drove 5 hours on Wednesday. We played Thursday night at 7 p.m. Friday, we didn't train. You know, we gave them a chance to do some extra recovery with our athletic trainer. You know, they did, you know, got the Normatex out, rolled, band, stretch, like all of that sort of stuff, a little bit of yoga, right? And kind of give them a chance to just flush everything out of their body physically rather than just getting on the bus again to go train somewhere again. And we played on artificial turf on Thursday night, so it's even more taxing on your body, right? So I think it's a lot of that, like kind of almost swallowing your pride as a coach a little bit and just not going out and just actually coaching and training every single day. It's doing what's best for the longevity of the season too.
I love that, and I think that's important as well, because sometimes you might have that pride on a high, and it's like, right, my team are always known for being grafters. They're always known for grinding, training, high intensity and performance. So when it comes down to that, you're actually pushing your players far beyond the limitations which, as coaches, we want to attain at times, but taking them beyond that and even further is actually detrimental to them in every component possible. So, you know, when it comes to that downtime and that importance to reflect and even just break away is so important and plays a big relief just on that breather side of things. When it comes to a day like today and having that reflection opportunity, do you give them anything specific to say, maybe a model or something that you'd like them to reflect on, or is it more of take the day how you need to take it on a reflection?
No, it's more kind of how they need it. You know, we do a couple different things that, you know, we work with you know, a couple different factors of, you know, people on the mental side of the game in our staff, right? So we have a full-time sports psychologist on staff in our athletic department, but we also work with a leadership development specialist, and she does a lot of work with us throughout the year on not just like leadership, but also like a lot of the mental, like the self-reflection, and like the full like holistic growth, and like the looking at it from like the big picture view throughout the whole season versus just like the individual moments. So when we have a lot of the end of the week, you know, those Sunday evenings, they'll have every other week reflections that they have to go through and fill out. And it's just simple survey. It's kind of rating, you know, some different things on scales of 1 to 10. It gives them a chance to kind of type in and add in their own thoughts and their reflections. And then, you know, we can see it as a staff. Our leadership development specialist, like she can see it as well. And none of, you know, their teammates can see it, none of that. And so like they have the different opportunities in there to kind of then talk about what's, you know, how they're really feeling, what's important to them, and the different sort of aspects that they felt like where they were successful in the week, whether that was on the mental side of the game, the social side of the game, the actual physical soccer side, right? And then also like how they want to approach the next bits, what sort of help that we can provide them, you know, in addition to what we're already doing, like all of those sort of things. And so it's a little bit more open forum for them. And I think that kind of the approach that we try to take with a lot of it is like give them some autonomy and some voice and a chance to kind of lead their own paths as well.
Again, that's important, you know, in consideration, because we can try and structure these players and go, right, you reflect here. This is how I want you to do it on your down day. These are the challenges which I'm giving you in training. These are the components I want you to focus on within the game. Then you've got this external factors and opportunities to build on your leadership and so on. This is what we're going to be doing across our periodization in total. This is what you need to do in the gym, and then you can fit in everything else around that. Whereas, you know, when you take that week in, week out over a course of a season, it can be quite robotic for a player, especially in a game which is supposed to be so creative, so free flowing, so
Right.
you know, a free sense of having that spiritual side where you're there to enjoy football for what it is, soccer, and have that. So, structuring in too much for me can be, again, detrimental to the player because you're overfilling them and creating a capacity which is further than they're able to have the ability to really manage and understand effectively.
Yeah, I 100% wholeheartedly agree. It's one of those where like you've just kind of let them be who they are, and especially like as you said, like when the season gets long, when it starts to you start to go through the ruts, like the start of the year is always so exciting. They're 100%, they're ready to be back at it. Right, the end of the year, like you're pushing for the conference tournament, you're pushing for the NCAA tournament. Like it's exciting. That middle part of the year can be challenging at times, right? Classes have started, exams have started to kick in, like your academic load starts to get busy, for the first years or the second years or the ones that maybe are still not 100% comfortable being away from home. Like now you've gotten to the point where you've been away from home for 2 months. You may not have seen your family for 2 months. Like there's so many different factors outside of that can be, pushing down and weighing down. I think like the more that you pile up on top of that for them, the more difficult it makes it for them. So the more that we can free them and allow them to be themselves, I think the better off they'll be.
100% and completely agree with you there. And when it comes down to it, then, are you very much a tactical kind of coach, a people kind of coach, a very all-round, holistic coach? How would you sort of pitch yourself, say, if in the four components you had to move a little marker, where would you pitch yourself, or would you put yourself right in the middle?
Yeah, no, so I think for me personally, I think I see the game well. I take pride in how, especially I see the in possession side of the game, right? I think that's what I enjoy. That's what I really I enjoy watching. I enjoy diving into studying. I enjoy spending time with other staffs, other coaches, learning from what they do. I spent a good time, amount of time this winter and spring, working with other staffs and kind of talking through like their teaching processes and their game models, and because they were schools and they were programs that I thought were some of the best two front forward systems in the country in the NCAA women's game, and so that's for me what I think. I think in the women's game, the three front, especially the women's college game, the three front is going out of fashion. It's getting to be so predictable. It's so every kid has played it. They've played against it. Like it's becoming more and more disadvantageous. I think by the years, and I think the two front is going to swing back into style a little bit more, and so I think it's something that we've really focused on trying to dive in. So like that sort of thing. But I also think like part of the good side of having younger staff, right? Like our staff as a whole is relatively young, but I'm not too far out, even removed from just age-wise, our oldest players, especially, right? So I think like being able to kind of relate a little bit more personally is beneficial as well. Like, it's not too far away being removed from their, point of view as a college student, as a 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old, right? Like, I think that's, something that's important too. Like you have to be able to relate to them. You have to be able to understand their memes, their TikTok trends, their like, whatever, right? Like you've got to be able to at least, even if I'm not sitting there making TikTok videos all day, at least I know like what they're talking about and like can laugh with them, can enjoy, and have like create relationships that are more than just like coach player. Like it can't be like that, because at the end of the day, like you don't want a culture where they're having to work for you. Like that's not going to get the best out of them. And in my opinion, like you want a culture where you're working together, for the long-term goal, for the end goal, for what the light at the end of the tunnel is for you.
And I'm completely there with you because, I've always worked with children and young people and in the coaching sort of essence as well as teaching, where I started at the age of 18. So when I was 18, I was around kids practically my age who I went to school with. And then I had to flip it into being a coach, being an educator straight away. And then going on that pathway, I've always still been very lucky to being in and around that and learning from them, still being able to connect them and still being a young person myself right up until 25. Now I'm turning 27 in 2 months. I'm starting to panic a little bit that I'm moving away from that age range to connect with them. But then on that spin then and that consideration, we all get a little bit older, but we're all sort of enjoying that connection, that relationship that we have with them, because we're able to relate to them. So whilst we do get older by nature of time and there's nothing we can do about it, Is that something which is sort of conscious on your mind where you're like, right, I have to keep up to date. I want to keep up to date. I know I'm getting a little bit older, but I don't want to take that mindset where I know I can connect with my players and so forth and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think if nothing else, it's like being able to match their energy and their enthusiasm, and not just match it, but like maybe even like add to it. And you know, we have our head coach Matt. Is saying like he talks about all the time like being a coffee bean, right? Like, you know, you add a coffee bean, right? Like to water, right? It turns the water into coffee, right? Like, you know, so it's you're adding something to the environment around you, you know, versus like, you know, you drop, you know, whatever into it, it disappears, it disintegrates, it melts into that environment, you know, versus in you know, embedding yourself into that environment, right? So I think it's, for me, it's wanting to be able to continue and being able to be, you know, someone that adds to the environment, to the positivity, and to the energy. You know, I think the moment that like you can't find that joy and that excitement and that level of adding to that every single day, you know, I think that's the moment that it'll be like okay, like you've got to start to ask, is this the right thing, right? So I think for me, it's definitely something that's conscious, and you know, I want to be able to be, you know, continue to add and continue to be a part of it. You know, I think that's the big thing is, right, it's you're a part of their journey, they're not a part of yours. So you've got to be able to stay up to speed with what they're doing, what they're talking about, and what they want to be doing. So
I love that coffee bean analogy, and I think that's such a great way to sort of think about it, especially in that way that you talk. And I love that. I love that consideration or reflection whereby you talk about being part of their journey, but they're not part of yours. So when you bring that into play, then, and you were to explore that even further, in that essence, then, do you really think that players aren't part of our journeys, and if so, why?
well, I don't think it's necessarily that they're not part of our journeys, but like I think, you know, they're not there to serve you, right? I think they're not there to like just push you along, right? Like we're there to influence them on the more so. And I think it's, you know, for me, what that means, I guess, is more so like, I guess the fact that like that's our job as educators, as coaches. You know, we're supposed to be helping guide them, helping, you know, make them, you know, help them to find, you know, their end goal, to help them to reach maximum potential, reach whatever they're looking for. You know, I think when you start to get to the mindset where like, hey, they're here to help me win, like I don't think that's right. Like that's not, to me, like just focusing on just the outcomes or focusing on your own self, you know, motivated goals to using these, you know, players, like that's not right in my mind, right? Like I think we're there to help them, and we're there to, you know, push them forward, and to truly serve them in their journeys. I think our journeys then come, you know, naturally, like if we do the right things by developing them as people, as soccer players, as just holistic human beings, right? Like we're going to get what we're seeking for our individual selves as well at the end of it, right? But I think it's more so focusing on loving the journey and the process, and the development of the young, you know, women, the young men, the, you know, whatever, right, that are around us, versus like I'm not using them to push me up the ladder, if that sort of makes sense.
Absolutely, it does, and I think it's great to sort of delve into that philosophical side of the things when it really comes down to it, because you know, there's so many different interesting points within that. Because as you're talking there, just before I left work, I was speaking to my boss, and he was just interested about the game of football, right? And in this, he was like, "All right, what about terminology in sport, and how much does this actually extend, and what do coaches bring to the game?" So, for example, a lot of European coaches to the English game, they're bringing what's called moments, and then English coaches are starting to talk in that way as well. And he was like, "What does moments actually mean in that scheme of things when you deliver it to young players or within that philosophy or approach?" So when it comes into it, reflecting upon that, between that and this conversation driving home, when it came down to it, then, you know, what does journey really mean? We keep using it as a word, and I love that, and I'm a big, huge fan advocate of it. You know, it's something which I use all the time. But then the more I have certain conversations, the more I start to question myself over certain things. So it's that bias which I sort of have right now, where I'm like, right, I think I might need a sabbatical out of coaching right now, just to try and redevelop my philosophy and framework of thinking. So when it comes down to journey, are you always on that journey, or do you sort of pitch it in any way other to yourself, whereby you know it's a bit more than a journey or something different, which can be very similar?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting like a reflection point and thought process, right? I think we're all on different journeys, pathways. I think it's you're right. Like that word is used a lot. I think the word process is used a lot, right? Like I think for me it's defining what that means and knowing that what that means may change on a month to month, a year to year basis, right? I think my thought process going into that, right, is like I think we're all on different journeys. I think we're all looking for certain things, but like I think it's understanding that while like the journey is maybe what you're focused on in the long term, right? Like not losing sight of like what's happening in the present moment. And we do a lot of work culturally in our program talking about like being present here and now and for the people around you and living in this present moment. And I think that's the mindset, right, that you're going to take, right? Maybe the long term, the outcome that you're seeking eventually is whatever, right? But if you don't invest in the process, if you don't invest in like the journey, the individual, like this moment in time, this present moment, right, then you're not going to. I think if you're only looking at the outcome, like you miss a lot of what's happening, and you don't necessarily maybe get the small gratifications, the small victories, the small wins, like and you may lose sight of why you're doing it, right? Versus like if you love the process, if you love the journey, and you love each present moment, right, and like what that means, you'll eventually get to that like outcome, to that end of your journey, that like wherever you're looking for. So as far as like what it means, I think it's going to mean something differently to everybody. I think it's going to mean something differently to each individual person, maybe from a week to week basis. But I think it's more so that like loving of each individual, like present moment, like that is like the important thing at the end of the day.
And again, there's so much within that which I think is really important. I love what you say in terms of how that's very different to every person, and defining that, and having that ability to understand it, to be prepared to take it away. And we're in sport, and the sport is very heavy detailed in terms of looking at aspirations, those outcomes, preparing for weeks ahead, team selection, recruiting for the year ahead, building on the foundations, performance indicators. Then we're looking at our personal lives and taking that within us. And there's a lot of time stamps on everything that we do, especially as a coach in the world that we're in, and it can be quite difficult to steer away and be sort of free flowing and away from a sort of structured pathway where we can be a little bit more flexible and free flowing. And when it comes down to that, we can always have an outlook upon the future where it's quite hard to focus on the here and now. But the really important point that you made, and I love, is live here within the moment, because you could be forward planning for next year, and then suddenly this year's flown by. You're like, what? I can't actually remember being 24, 25, 26 because I was all about just grind, work, study, and then suddenly you're 26, you're like, oh shit, like these years have passed by, I can't get them back. And that's a point which I'm starting to get a little bit now. I'm like, I can't actually remember being like 22, 23, 24. I can remember aspects of it and what I've done, but in the key moments in life, I was like, right, I haven't actually got many of them because work is quite high. And I'm like, right now I want to bring that balance down, and this is where I'm at 27. So it's quite a nice place to be, but it's also one where I'm like, right, I've only got 3 years left in my 20s. I want to make the absolute most of these next 3 years, because I can't go back at the age of 30 and go, yeah, I'm still in my 20s, because that's gone. So I don't want to look back in regret. So the importance is, right, I've realised it now, so can I make the next 3 years count? So I absolutely love that point about living in the moment, especially us as coaches, because it can be such a hard thing, man.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so easy to just like look at, hey, like, yeah, like we're playing tonight, but like I'm just looking at next week because that's the top of the table clash, right? That's the one that matters. Like it's so easy to look, or it's so easy to be like, like maybe the results haven't gone as well as we want to this year, but like next year we've got X, Y, and Z player coming in. We know it's going to improve, this element or this element of our team, and we're going to be better next year. Like you can't do that, right? Like because at the end of the day, like this is what matters right now, right? Like nobody cares what next week looks like. Nobody cares from the outside like what next year is going to be like. They're looking at now, right? They, your job as a coach and as an educator is to help what's in front of you now, to focus on what's in front of you now, and I think like that's the it's easy to lose sight of that at the end of the day. And so I think the more that we can like circle back and keep like putting ourselves on the right pathway, the better we'll be in the long run.
And again, what you say there is just maybe reflect and think so much as you're talking. And again, there's so many points which I really love and chatting about. And I'm reading a book right now which has been recommended by another soccer coach from the US, which has been one of the best purchase decisions I've ever made. But within that, there's one key question which has stuck out to me straight away. And I've written it straight down on a sticky note. But that question is, what is one thing that you have done that you're proud of today, this week, or this year? So if I was to pitch that to you, is there a standing out moment where you go, yeah, that's there?
And so something I've been proud of, I think it's kind of funny, the thing that like I've been reflecting on. So you pointed out like some of the funky scarves, right? So the orange and black one, right? So that was my high school that I went to. When I graduated high school, I went off to school, school in Ohio, right? So about 4.5 hours away. Right after I graduated high school, my dad had passed away super suddenly, unexpectedly. I was 4.5 hours away from home in a funky mental state, right? Like I wasn't, where I was supposed to be. So I left school in the middle of my first semester. There's just so much going on, right? Far away from home. That had just happened. My family my mom and my sister were home alone, like dealing with the pressures of like a college adjustment is big, and then like being a student athlete and all of those sort of things, right? And so when I went home, my old high school coach, who ran a very small little club, right, offered me a chance to kind of start working with him, coach an under-9s team, like little boys, like 8-year-old boys, right? And started working with him in the winter and took over the team in the spring. And so now my fast forward moment, right, like it's so much fun. That group that I had, most of them right now are now sophomores, freshmen, juniors in high school, right? And that school that they're all at is having its best year, the highest ranking in the state in the school's history. They're, pretty close to locking up a conference title. Like it's really fun kind of like looking at that. But the whole reason why I bring that up though is it's really fun, I think, looking and reflecting, not necessarily on an individual moment, right? But like looking at like just the different players that you impact in their journeys. I've had experience in the youth game, had experience in the college game, obviously. I've worked with, under 23s, college summer league, semi-pro, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, all of those different things. I think no matter where, I think the thing that's fun to look back on and reflect on and really be proud of is like watching, like looking at players that you impacted their journey and like, hey, where were they as an 18-year-old now, starring for their high school, or as an 8-year-old now starring for their high school team, right? Where were they as a 13-year-old that's now a junior in high school and being recruited to play college soccer? Like, can you think of like what were they the first time you had them at practice versus like where they are now? And I think that's what's, when I look at like what I can be proud of in the journey, is like I just think all the different kids that you get to affect. And so I know that wasn't a perfect answer, or it wasn't like a very like direct like pinpoint one moment in time, but I think it would be impossible to pick out like in my journey at least, like something that because I think they're all they're so important, they're so fun to be a part of.
I think that's a great answer, by the way, and I think it's so heartfelt and true and honest, which is such a great answer to such a question that is thought-provoking and really enhances what we're talking about. But as you spoke about so much there was so much which I can relate to. So, even having a team where I had them from under 5s to sort of under 12s, borderline 13s, and I got to a point where I was like, right, I want to work in a seniors game now, so I want to work with under 18s and I want to work with the senior adults team, and I want to look at how we can work in the tactical side of things and start to up my game in that level, because we play a lot of 4v4, 5v5, 6v6, 7v7, 9v9, so I want to do a bit more with 11v11 and that tactical approach and exploding that a little bit more, and trying to progress players into the first team as such. So I had to make a very tough decision to walk away from on a team that I have for 7 or 8 years and sort of stopped being a part of their journey, and one which I'd always thought I'd be with until they were at least 16 and they went, right, yep, I'm leaving for this club, I'm moving on from there. And I spent a year with the team at senior level, and it was a great opportunity and it was great progress. But naturally, at the end of that year, by the time the 16s were moving into 18s for this year, they had a coach who wanted to come up who had been with the team since they were under sixes themselves. So naturally, by order of things, he wanted to become head coach, and so I decided, yep, do you know what? You've been with the club for 12 years or so on. It's not really my team; it's your team, and I'm not going to stand in the way of you because I know what it's going to be like if someone said that when I had my team. But naturally, moving on and trying to progress in my head and focus on a strategy to move forward, it actually ended up being one of the worst decisions that I made because I ended up losing out on a team I was very emotionally attached to, had great moments with, because I was trying to be less emotional and more strategic. Whereas actually on the flip side, it would have been better off being more emotional than strategic at times. And that's why it's so hard in terms of that philosophy in life, ourselves, being in coaching, to try and pull one from the other in terms of that string to try and realize where we want to be at and where we're enjoying right now.
Yeah, no, I 100%. I think it's kind of it's kind of funny, right? Like the things that you think are I guess one of the things that we talk about too is like recruiting is such a big part of like the college game, right? And like so many times you have players that like they're so focused on like, hey, this is my dream, this is what I want to be, this is what I think before they even go through that process, versus like sometimes you miss out on like where you're supposed to be because you're so focused on like where you maybe think you want to be, right? And so I think that's important about like just like trusting yourself and your gut and your emotions and who you genuinely are, and who you authentically are, because I think you end up more often than not like in the right place where you're supposed to be when you do that, versus like that, hey, like I think I'm supposed to be here, so like I just need to focus on that, if that sort of makes sense.
100%, and of course it makes sense, and it's great to work with these players because we get to see them progress and move on as well. So when you do recruit those new players, you get them through the door. You can look at them and go, "This is what I'd like you to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years, or whenever the period of time that you have them for finishes." And realistically, then you've got that sort of pitch point where you're like, "Right, do I want them to do this, or is it more of what they would like to do?" And then it's trying to find that sort of balance between, right, this is what we could take away from me, and this is what we could take away from you. And if you exceed what I set out for you, then boom, we have done our job as coaches and a lot more. So you've had that success, and it's great as a personal gratification where you can actually see this player succeed even further than what you set out for him.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%.
And so when it comes down to it, working with players, they have so many different personalities, needs, wants, different reflections, responses, and so on. And this is what I love about working with so many different players, because they respond in so many different ways. And the college game, you have so many players coming through because you're doing recruitment, you're trying to get them on to scholarships or professional game and so on. So it's that constant sort of conveyor belt as such, whereby you're constantly moving and on that process, that journey, which is non-stop. So it's very much a stop-start process as well at times, because you have to stop, get new players in, reintroduce, go again. Do you find that hard as a coach, or is that something that you thrive off in, that enjoyment where you get to get so many different players, so on, and continue that process ongoing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's difficult in a few things, right? Like it's not just the players that are in and out, but it's the coaches, right? Like I think the college game is very volatile, right? Like especially as young assistants, like you're very rarely in the same space for more than a couple of years at most, right? Because it's you're in the door, you're trying to find that next thing, the job that pays you more, so you're not just eating ramen noodles every night. The job that gets you to the point where, hey, like now I'm starting to be in a position where we're competing for something. The job that gets you to whatever, right? Whatever that continued thing. The job that gets you ready to be a head coach. There's so many different steps on that journey. I kind of, my wife and I laugh about it. Like I haven't coached a full class of players that I've recruited yet. Like I have a couple players. Right? I think we have I transfer a couple international players that I recruited this year, right? That I got to coach. I've gotten to coach, and currently am this fall, right? But next fall, if I'm still here, will be the first time I've coached like a full class top to bottom that I recruit. It's kind of funny, right? And so I think you're really just kind of having to adapt to what's around you, right? Like, I think in the professional game, it's a little bit more like, hey, you snap your fingers, you can make a can transfer, you can, it's very specific where like, hey, you're going to go after this or this or this, and you can kind of build your team exactly 100% to how you want. In the college game, you can do that a little bit recruiting, but like, it's still not quite the same, and you're still like constantly making changes of like, hey, maybe this is our game model, this is who we want to be, but like we're going to actually be, slightly more direct, or we're going to be slightly less aggressive pressing, or we're going to be slightly, whatever. We're going to change shape this year because we don't have true wing backs, so we don't have attack-minded wing backs that can play up and down the field, and so we can't play with, in a 3-back, 5-back system, right? Like, you never know what you're going to kind of look at and what you're going to kind of see. And so long story short, I agree. I think it's kind of fun. It's kind of different, especially when that like tactical brain side of you, right? Like you really have to work a lot to kind of break things down. And like one of the big things, like I said, like I love the in possession side of the game. Like, we probably don't have like a true like in the box, like poaching, like goal scoring, like get, goal scoring forward attacking player right now. Like we have a lot of really talented attacking players, a lot more of like the creative, like I'm going to create chances for somebody else. Like, we have a junior right now that's already broken, with a whole year and a half left to play. So she's broken our school's, career assist record. Right. And so like, I think that's, it's amazing, but she's not someone that's just going to go like, she doesn't have that same mentality of someone that's just going to receive the ball and just go make goals happen. Right. Like she's going to make goals happen for somebody else, but like, that's not her mentality versus like last year we had someone that did that. And so for us, it was a little bit more simpler in the attack. It was like, hey, get her into a space where she was maybe isolated and she's going to go make a goal happen, versus right now we don't necessarily have that. So it's been a little bit more of a fun challenge. Like, hey, how do we create goals a little bit more? How do we, get more people in spaces that can potentially finish, right? So I think it's a constant, like, a constant, like, re-diagnosing and trying to solve things and trying to find new answers to the same problems, I guess is kind of the simplest way to put it. At the end of the day, it's the same problems. At the end of the day, you got to keep the ball out of the net. You got to put it in the other teams, but you've got a different way to look at it every single semester, really.
And that's what keeps us adapting as coaches as well, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you realistically can't be settled, and you've been looking at the best managers in the world in the professional game, and how different their looks maybe from one year to the other. I know that there is people were all over, being that I love Arsenal and diving into that. Like people were like all over Arteta at the beginning of the Premier League season this year because of essentially the different approach with how he was using fullbacks and where he was like deploying Thomas Partey to use him as like kind of the similar role to Zinchenko, like where he'd line him up as a right back and ask him to come in and be a midfielder, and like different things like that, and how he was using Havertz and like different things like that. But it's for even Mikel Arteta, it's hey, like we were good enough to contend but now I've got to do something else because people are going to start to see, they start to know, they're starting to catch, like how do we make that next jump to try to push past City, right? Like it's those different elements that no matter what level of the game you are, whether it's the top of the top, whether it's somewhere in the middle, or even like at the absolute grassroots level, you're still doing something different every single year. And I think, like you said, that's the fun. That's the fun in it for sure.
And I think it's great because it's every different level, but it's so relatable across all those levels, which comes into play as well. And whilst you're very possession focused in your mindset and how you like to play, as you touched upon earlier, everyone's got something which they can bring into the dressing room, into the environment, into the job. And it's that set of skills, that experience which you're able to bring. And, if I'm a chairman or I'm in a CEO position and I want to go, do you know what, Zach? Look, I've got this position. I know that you're very tactical based on your game possession model. But what can you bring that is different to these 4 coaches which I've interviewed, which I want you to have this job, but what are you bringing to my team?
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of what we just talked about, right? I think it's the willingness to adapt, the willingness to be creative, to seek knowledge, to find new things. I mean, like I said earlier, like I felt like pretty strongly about like the thing with the three front kind of dying in the women's college game, especially, right? And it's something where like, okay, like I can't just say that though. I've got to go find like where's the data, where's the numbers, and then like the best people, teams in the country, like how do they train it, how do they teach it, how do they deploy it, right? Like all those different things. And, it's willing to put in the extra work to go, go see that, go make things happen. I spent my birthday this past spring because we were on our school's on spring break, so we didn't have it. So I drove 6 hours up north to go watch a team train, a team that was in the second, third round of the NCAA tournament last year. Go watch them train, to go sit in the office with their coaching staff and talk through their game model and how they deployed their two front system and how they what parts of the field they really look to exploit and how they teach that and the different things and watch their team train, and then drove 6 hours home, because I thought it was going to be beneficial for me in the long run and for our program here, right? And so like those little things, I don't think I'm the only person in the world that's doing that. Like I'm not naive, but like I think that's what sets people apart, that are going to be maybe who's successful now, maybe here, but like who's going to be successful in 2 years and in 4 years and in 5 years versus the person that's going to sit in their same way. And I only play this style. I only coach in this system, in this shape, and I only recruit players that fit this X, Y, and Z build. Because if you're not willing to adapt and to change your ways, like the game's going to adapt and you're going to be left behind.
And I'm completely with you there as well. And just as you say that as well, for players or coaches who have played the game and they've had some sort of background and history, and they may have come through the game at certain levels and then progress into a coaching role, compared to someone who's never sort of really played to a good standard or degree, never went to sort of college or uni to play it, but is someone who went on, done teaching or done some other career path and then went into coaching. Do you think there's a point where one coach will outweigh the other because of their experience? So the coach who had that playing experience a lot more than the player who didn't, do you think that they will always be ahead of that coach? Or do you think there's a chance for this coach to move above the other coach? Or do you think they can sort of weigh out depending on who it is?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that like I don't think it matters, right? Like I know there's so many different things, right? If you didn't play at this level, you shouldn't be coaching at this level. If you didn't whatever, that like there's still people that like at the end of the day, like there's still people that believe that a woman can't coach a men's team, right? Like I think there's so many different things like that I just don't think it's true. Like I think it's all about like what you're willing to do as far as like the extra work to understand the game, to spend knowledge, to spend time, accumulating knowledge and learning about the different elements. But it's also not just like being able to see the game, but it's also how to manage personalities, how to manage, the locker room, like keep the emotions together, keep, build a culture that is moving in the right direction, in the same direction, with each other. I think there's so many different elements to that there can be a player that is absolutely world class, that knows every bit of the game, but has no ability to actually coach and teach, right? There may be somebody that has not played the game at a super high level, but is a fantastic teacher. They understand the game to a decent level, but maybe they have no idea how to manage players because they haven't had that personality, or they haven't dealt with, a player that's been making millions or whatever, right? Like they've never been around that, right? So they don't know how to manage those personalities. Like there's so many different elements of where you can kind of draw your strengths and your weaknesses from. And I think it's as long as you're willing to pour into the areas that you need to grow in and pour into those elements, I think anybody can overcome whatever that is to end up being at the desired level. I don't think should be a restriction based on this or that. And I think it's why education is important. It's why, whether it's formal coaching education, whether it's, informal, going to training sessions, spending time with other coaches, sitting through, learning through game models, learning through like the sports psych, the mental performance side of things, like how to manage personalities, how to manage, the different things that motivate players to play. Like there's so many different elements of that. You've got to pour into all of them. And I think with enough work, you can, there's no reason why anybody from any background wouldn't be able to have success in a specific area.
And I'm again advocate entirely what you say, because I didn't play to a very good level. I didn't play on beyond my youth years. I didn't enjoy it beyond 16. So that's what led me into coaching even earlier than anticipated or wanted to. But I enjoyed coaching from a younger age. So I had that awe and essence of it. But as I've started to get older, there's little things in the change room as I've managed all the players is, oh, I actually miss out on that, or I actually didn't take that away, or actually, oh, I don't quite understand that because I wasn't in that context. So just little things that I know that I miss out on, but I don't feel that I'm limited to, because I feel that I can learn them as a coach and understand them from a player perspective, whereby I'm not limiting myself or ruling myself out just because I wasn't a player. So what you say there, I think, is really important for any coach to keep adapting and keep moving forward, but don't limit yourself because you didn't play at certain levels, because we're seeing all manner of coaches come through who are actually having so much success even though they didn't play at certain levels. And that is something which I love to see, because I don't think you have to have a defined route in the sport or as a coach to go, right, yeah, you've done this, you've done that, and this makes you this X amount of coach or this kind of coach because you had this experience.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, look at oh my gosh, what is his name in the Bundesliga right now? That's had the you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah,
It came up from no playing background, no really deep high level coaching background, and then all of a sudden has been managing Bundesliga side to good strong performances over the last year. And I think it's amazing. And I think the other one that I always like look at, American basketball, college basketball coach Tom Crean is his name. He got cut from his high school JV basketball team, became a student manager with the team, and so he was working with the varsity team and a student manager. The varsity team would go play, wherever on Friday night. He would go and drive and watch whatever team they were going to play next. He would do the scouts. He would do video analysis, like all of that sort of stuff. Come back, present it to the coach, who he's a 16-year-old kid at this time, wasn't good enough to play on even the junior varsity team, let alone the varsity team, right? And now he turned into he was a fantastic coach at Marquette, Indiana, some of the biggest basketball schools in the country, and I think it's a perfect example of he's willing to put in the work to understand the game, understand how to teach it, understand how to relate to players, and put in the extra work to do those things. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like if he could play because he can coach. I think at the end of the day, you're not asking for players, you're asking for coaches.
And I completely love what you say there, and completely love the life experience that you bring with it in terms of that real life model. And when it comes down to it, then you've deployed your game model. You've got a syllabus which might go, right, this week we're working on breaking lines. This week we're playing out from the back. We're going to play through the middle. We're going to switch play. We're out to the channels and so on. So you've got that syllabus which then explores these many different areas for players to really understand that tactical side and the psychological side as well. But when there's that teaching and learning, as you say, and helping players and really helping guide them, on top of that, you're layering then a curriculum of teaching and learning on top of that in terms of problem solving, understanding, being part of an environment, life skills, being able to be the leader on a team, and everything else which comes into it. And I think that's the difference between what is a good program to what is a great program, because you're layering on that level of teaching and learning, which has a bigger component for me, in essence, of contributing towards coaching rather than coaching and then teaching and learning, or coaching without teaching and learning, for example.
No, yeah, I mean 100%, right? If you're not layering all the different elements, and if it's not all together and holistic, it's not going to have the same outcome. It's not going to have the same success in the long run, right? Maybe I always say like the small sample sizes can be whatever, but like when you look at the whole, like that's why you invest in and you trust and you believe in the fact that the things that you're doing are going to pay off over time, and it's going to layer in, it's going to matter, and I think you've just got to keep pouring into all the different elements, because it's going to develop quality human beings, quality soccer players, quality people. Like it's that's what we're here for at the end of the day, is to help develop young people.
And so for me, it's like I'm coaching, say, the junior side underneath you. I've coached and coached this player. I've got them to say, a grade A example on all the competencies that we want them to meet. So I bring them up. They're a very good player, which I've coached. But then you start to coach them, you realise, right, they don't have the actual psychological side which I want them or need them to have at this level. They're actually not understanding components of the game to a great enough extent. So therefore, a player who might then have that knowledge and maybe say a C grade at a technical level, they might actually then move quicker than a player at A grade technical level because they've got that background knowledge, which then allows them to go, do you know what, actually, I've used everything in my tank. We got 20 minutes ago, but actually, if I just control the play and I just drop in here and I move out and I'm slipping other players into play rather than just running around pressing, then their performance will actually level out to be very good. So, when it comes to that level, I think it just shows the importance of understanding where players are at and understanding that they may not always be at those levels, but how can you get them to those levels, which is really important, and understanding that they might not be at the required areas for the program, but how do you support them in doing that? And therefore, times like reflection points are such an important point to play in the grand scheme and the bigger picture of things.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you're constantly balancing those sort of things, right? And it's like investing in like, hey, like we understand that you get this and this and this, and how do we start to develop these things to add into that, right? And it's the same vice versa, right? Like, hey, like this is why we talk so much about individual development plans on top of like the team training environment, right? And so like we have players that and maybe they understand the game, they know it well, but like you can't bring a ball down in a crowd of 2-3 people around them, right? So like for us, then it's okay. Like let's spend a lot of extra time training, away from training, a lot of individual session. Like just gonna sit and I'm gonna ping balls at you, and you got to settle the ball down, be able to turn it and finish, under control and in a tight space, right? Or it's maybe like, hey, like you can do all of those things, but you're absolutely, lost on the field, so you can't ever get on the ball. Okay, let's dive into film. Let's dive into tactical conversations. Like let's draw on the whiteboard. Let's find different situations. Let's just watch soccer together and let's talk through the movement of the player in your position, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can pour into those different elements. And so it's I think to your point, right? It's seeing not just what's present in front of you with this player, but like, can you see what the whole model of who that player is going to be and how you can get them to being impactful in all of those different areas.
Again, such an important scope and a great way that you model that together, which really pieces together a great reflection point and consideration there. And when it comes down to those players, you're really trying to look at how you can model and take away different elements to support them on their journey. What do you think has been the biggest lesson that you've learned so far in life as well as a coach?
Yeah, I think I think patience. I think that may be a corny and maybe a bit of an overused example, right? But like, I do think at the end of the day, like patience is so important. I think when I look back at my like 18-year-old self that was first learning how to be a coach, it was like just snap, reaction, like this isn't happening, like this is why, like versus I think my willingness to not be so reliant on or not need to have everything go perfect or not need to have results or instant gratification, and being willing to trust in like the grand scheme of things has come so much more over time, right? Like, there's a point this year where we were, gosh, I want to say like 1-6, 1-5-1, or something like that. Like we weren't having a great year result wise at the start of the year, but like then you sit down and you look at like, okay, like look at the number of times that we've, one of the big things that we chart is entrances in the penalty area, right? Like, and then we chart like from there services, angles of services, like those are some big things that we focus on in the offensive, in possession side of the game, right? Like, because we think that in the long term is going to generate more goals, right? Like that's just kind of the basic thing, right? And so for us, you start to look at that and like statistically, with the pure numbers and the pure volume, it's miles better than anything that we've had the last 2-3 seasons. But then you look at the results and it's like, it's not great, right? But you just know it's coming, right? And eventually, instead of being shut out with 2.5 xG, right? Eventually you're gonna have 2.5 xG and you're gonna explode for 4 or 5 goals, right? Like eventually you're gonna outperform the number instead of underperform the number, and it's trusting and having patience and believing in the players and the environment around you. And I think it's life as well, right? Like it's not just a soccer thing, right? Like patience and understanding and believing that things are going to work out like around you the neighbor that drives you crazy because they leave their dogs out barking all day long. Like eventually they're going to figure out like, hey, maybe I should bring my dogs inside when they bark. Just different things like that. Like rather than flipping out and being upset or whatever, like you can't control those things at the end of the day. Like you can't control the outcomes. So can you believe and have patience that the outcomes will come with you continuing to like we talked about earlier, like really investing in the present moment and in the present process and those sort of things.
Another top answer to another great balance point in terms of that reflection. And when you've had that biggest lesson, which has been patience and what you've taken away from it, and you've given that example, what has been the biggest challenge that you've faced as a coach then?
I mean, I want to win. I love winning. And so I think that's the thing is like it's your athletes want to win too, right? They're competitive people. They want to win. Yeah, and so in the moments that it's not, it's you kind of first convince yourself and remind yourself why you're doing it and why you're having patience and why you're investing in the whole process versus like that outcome. But also you've got to convince 30 plus super competitive 18 to 22-year-olds that same sort of thing, right? And it's certainly not easy, and it's certainly like not easy for myself. It's not easy for them. Like it's not easy for anybody at certain times. But like I think that's the thing is like trying to always keep that 30,000 foot view and be able to see the whole picture versus just that specific outcome or just whatever you're seeking for that may not be going as planned, right? And it's a constant battle of like your emotions and but I think it's something that, like I said, I'm not perfect. I definitely am better than I was when I was 18. I'm definitely will be better than I was now in another 8 years, right? And so it's a process and it's a journey for all of us.
Again, I love that, and I think it's so important as well that you give that experience of those areas which really come into play as well. And when you love to win, you want to be there, and that's the whole point of sport in the end of the day. And I know it can be argued in many different ways, etc. But bottom line, it is to win because that's what people want to see, and that's what they want to be part of. No one wants to be part of a losing squad, and I suppose if you do, good luck to you. And if there's something that you want to take on as a personal challenge, then enjoy it for what it is. But when it comes down to winning and wanting to be part of that, and this could be seen in so many different ways and evaluated, but what are your, say, top 5 ingredients then that helps create a winning and positive mentality on a game day that might edge you closer to winning, where you feel, right, we've done these 5 ingredients or we've instilled them, I feel like we're in a better position than if we didn't have them?
Yeah, I think most of them are mental, right? Like I think it's on the mental side of the game. That's because I think it's obvious, right? Like you got to be able to play the game, but you got to be able to to tactically put yourselves in position, right? But I think it's more the mental side of things, like and I think it's specifically like when you hit moments of adversity within the game, right? So like being able to stay calm, being able to be adaptable, right? Being able to have confidence that like, hey, we may have gone down a goal, but it's no big deal, right? We're gonna make it work, right? It's I think the positivity is huge too, right? And then, man, a fifth one is probably, gosh, I think like a relentless, mindset, right? So like calm, like can you be calm? Can you ride the waves of the emotions of the game? Like even when you go up a goal, like you're going to get the best, the best shot right back at you, right? So like, can you ride that emotion? Can you be positive? Can you continue to drive that positive energy, even when moments are tough? Can you be adaptable if things have to change, right? If you got to switch tactically, if you've got to move things around because something isn't working or maybe something is too successful from the opposition side, like there's so many different elements, but I think they're all mental, right? Because at the end of the day, like you're going to have players that are going to be technically good enough, especially when you get to this level, right? Like every Division 1 soccer player in the country, for the most part, is a good player, right? Like every team is going to be able to get a result on a given day, So it's the mental side of things that like adds to it and is usually that extra, kind of push over the top.
I love those 5 ingredients, and they play such an important part. And I'm very key on those mental areas, especially for match day. So when it comes to laying out the numbers, say 1 to 15 in my match day squad, I want to make sure the goalkeepers sat together, the defenders, the midfielders, and the attackers, because I want to go around every group and talk to them about what those instructions are, what I expect from them, as well as being able to group them together where they can have conversations and have those reflection points at half time of what's not working for them within those strands upon the game, where they can really take that forward. So whether the attackers want to go, right, I want you to push forward so I can drop the ball in and so on, they can have that conversation amongst themselves, so they're taking ownership of that learning, and that's something which I'm really key on. And then when it comes to, say, the side, I want players to lead the warm-up under the expectation so they know how to go straight in. So this is how they come into the match room, change room, this is how then they come out, this is what we do for the warm-up, this is how we bring in, this is how the group's set together, and we got our kits on. So it's very much all mentally prepared, and we're making sure we're very organised. So, when I took over the team, they used to just go out on a typical walkout for when we played the team. So I wanted to change that, whereby it was very much like a Premier League team, where the captain was at the front, and then the goalkeeper, and then everyone else followed, because it just helps give that order, that structure. You've got someone leading the line at the front, you're very organised then, and I think it just adds a little bit more element where you can really step up and be like, right, look at us, look at where we're at. So it gives them that more ownership and, again, leadership, where they're able to reflect, they're able to take forward, you're able to instill those qualities amongst them, and you can really help towards those ingredients, which is going to progress you forward to winning that, I believe.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think like the more confidence, the more organization, the more autonomy that they have, especially when it comes to match day, like the better off. Because at the end of the day, like you and I are on the field solving problems for them, right? They've got to figure it out themselves. At the end of the day, like we can help and we can make little adjustments, but you get one chance to talk at halftime. You get one chance to talk and to set the team before the game. And then you maybe get to make a change when you make a substitution at some point in the second half. But like other than that, like it's up to them. At the end of the day, like you can't make decisions for them, so they've got to be able to solve problems and have the confidence and the calmness and the ability to do that and to work things out themselves.
Again, I agree with every component that you say there. So when it comes down to the change room then itself, and you've got match day, you've got your team prepared, you're in a position where you like to get the team out and really deliver upon that game model which you've instilled over the week. What ambience do you like to have within the change room itself?
Yeah, I mean, our kids are nuts. It's music, it's loud, it's positivity. They're jumping around, they're excited, right? Like, and that's the personality that our group has, right? And I think it's for them, it's allows them to be free. It allows them to be confident. It allows them to just be having fun, right? And it takes the nerves away. It takes that, right? Like, I've walked into locker rooms before where it's been dead silent and no one's saying a word, and you can just feel the tension and the tightness, and like they may be focused, but like you also get that little hinge of like one thing goes wrong, like it's gonna the balloon's gonna burst, right? And so I definitely love the free the energy, the mentality of just like, hey, we're gonna have fun, we're gonna be positive, we're gonna be loud, we're gonna be energetic. I think it's a very different, the American college game, especially on the women's side, is different in that sense from especially the professional game, especially the European models of like, our players stand the whole game. They run around, they jump, and they yell on the sideline versus like, you never would see that in a European professional match. Like they're all sat in the benches and in the seats, and they're watching so I think it's partly culturally here, but like I do think it does serve for a lot of like energy, especially when instead of playing in front of 20,000 people, you may have 200 at a match day, right? So like the energy isn't going to be provided by the crowd, right? The energy is going to be provided by you and your group, because I think we all would agree that like there is definitely a different feeling from like playing around a large environment where there's a lot of people screaming and yelling versus like an empty pitch on a Wednesday evening, in a random middle of nowhere Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, whatever, like wherever we might be, like it's going to be very different if there's no energy around you.
And I suppose that's where the importance of the ingredients come from. So when you're mentally prepared, if you're going into those different change rooms where, it's not as welcoming, it's a bit more challenging, you haven't got the crowds behind you, you're in a very different spectator led environment, then there's a lot which can really put a player off their game. Whereas if you're mentally prepared, you've got these ingredients and you're structured in terms of your game model, you know what you're going to deliver, then it helps you overcome what those fears and maybe those barriers are to try and put yourselves forward towards the winning element which you want, which is really important in supporting those players and how you deliver that on match day.
For sure, 100%.
And when it comes down to match day, then, do you have a certain structure which you go by every week in terms of the same warm-up and routines and what you expect in the change room, or is that a little bit more fluid and change week to week?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty routine, right? I think athletes are creatures of habit. They want to have a little bit more routine. I think for us, it's probably a little bit different when we're at home versus when we're on the road. I don't think hotels usually aren't the most comfortable places like when we're on the road. So like usually we'll arrive at a game a little bit earlier when we're on the road, right? Like give them a little bit of a time to walk around at the stadium, to sit in the locker room, to kind of get focused on soccer versus like sometimes it feels like it's a travel, it's a trip versus like an away match day, if that sort of makes sense. So kind of be able to switch from that travel mode to like the match day mode. But at home, like it's very routine. It's similar, we're spending time together. We're getting, pregame meal, pregame, the final scout, the final, kind of videos of the opposition, like those sort of things, where it's still pretty similarly routine. And then, they're on the field at the same time leading up to the match. We run the warm up the same way. They're excuse me. They're with us on the field for the same amount of time each match, like those different things, and then it's the little things, right? Like it's the juggles with the certain players. It's the walking around trying to nutmeg the certain players. It's the same sort of like things, the little things that you kind of do in each match day that are gonna make it feel comfortable and make it feel routine.
And when it comes down to that match day squad, then do you have a certain amount of players which you take then on the match day itself?
Yeah, so we're at home. We're allowed to dress everybody. Everyone can dress. Everyone can be a part of it. When we're away, sometimes we're able to take the full squad. Some days we're only able to take 22, 24 players. And so then for us, it's, with the college substitution rules, we can play them all. We can play whatever, but it's definitely a certain, different environment when like this past weekend, we took 24 players and so we had 9 players still at home, so that's a different environment and different, ingredient mentally too. And so then now how do you reintegrate those 9 back in today, tomorrow, Wednesday, and then get them ready for, home match days where they're going to be dressed on Thursday and Sunday this week. So it's, that's definitely another element to it too, for sure.
And, if you've got a squad of 35 players and I'm recruiting, do I have to fill, say, a roster of 35 players? Or could I go, right, do you know what, I'm happy at 27 and we got 8 more free spaces? Is that sort of dictated to us, the college or by the program? Would I have to fill all 35? I'm very much, a noob when it comes to your regulations.
Yeah, no. So I think it's every school is different. Some schools they're going to want you to have a few more. Some schools they don't really care. And then every coach is different too. I think college game is challenging because there's so many matches in such a small window. And so for us, like having I don't think you can survive with 24 players, right? Because you're naturally going to have injuries, naturally going to have players that are going to need to sit in matches. You're going to it's just going to happen because there's so many matches in a small window. So we like to be around 32 players because I think, if you have, say, 4 goalkeepers, 28 field players, something like that, right? You're going to have 28 field players. You're going to have, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out at a given time with a knock right here or an injury there, like whatever. It still allows you to have the opportunity to play 11s in training. It still allows you to have a full match day squad with everybody dressed in that you need. It allows you to rotate. It allows you to go 2, 3 deep in certain positions. Like, I think the balance of having that flexibility is good. And I think like the pace of the women's college game is very different too than even the highest level, women's youth games in Europe. Like, our players that have come over, we have a player this year that's, she was with AC Milan's under 20s, under 19s, wherever their max is. And with Italy's, under 19 national team and those matches for her are very different than here. Like the games are much more physical. It's a lot more. It's a little bit more like the pace is a bit more running, right? Because of the American game is a little bit more transitional than it is in say Italy and say most of Western Europe. It's a different demand physically on your body. The travel is more too, right? Like with us even at the college level having to take flights to games, having to play twice a week, or having to like this weekend we drove 5 hours, played Thursday, we had to drive another 5 hours, play on Sunday, and then drive another 6 hours home, right? Like that's a challenging stretch too, and there's different demands that I think require a little bit larger numbers. And when we were talking about like rotations and stuff earlier, like and what you expect to do and how you expect to rotate players, like a player that has played almost 90 minutes in almost all of our matches this year, and she had to come off like 25 minutes into the half yesterday because her legs were just exhausted. Like her legs weren't there that day, and you never know what's going to happen. And I think it's why it's important to have not just numbers but like quality in numbers too. Right, like going to have 22, 24, 26 players that can play like that are good enough to be on the field, because you're going to need to use them in most years.
And it's so interesting to have that sort of comparison of other coaches and programs and the way that they approach things. I woke up the other morning from a text from a coach over in the US, and he was telling me about how the game went earlier on in that day, and he was saying when I read it, and I was like, oh wow, he made something like 22 changes in one game, and I was like, I remember once when we put our under 14s and 15s team together at a semi-pro club at an academy level, and I had to take charge of that, and just rotating the amount of players between the two squads where I had like 26 players was one of the most difficult things I have ever done, and it was such a difficult place, and I was like, how do you even get to a point where you make those amount of changes? And I suppose if you're pre-planning or looking at a game whereby you're going to take a squad of 25 players or whatnot, and you're going to be making so many different changes, you're planning them in, you're having that rotation, as you say, you're reintegrating players, and players may be selected to come into this game, you're evaluating, you're in a position where you need to get minutes and so on. There's so many variables which are important, and hence why he had a squad so big. But when it comes down to it can be such a difficult place to sort of be in when you've got 25 players and you've made like 20 odd changes across a match between those rotations, those ons and offs, and different positions, etc.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely it's a challenge, and it's like with the way the rules work, like a player can come off in the first half and they can't go back in until the second half, and then in the second half they can go back in again even if they come off in the first half, but in the second half they can come off and they can go back in again. So it's a lot to track too, and a lot to manage as a coach. I think it's you're constantly trying to weigh in that balance, and you're also like, because it adds a different element, like it's another kind of tactical thing that you got to think about too. With other teams that you play, like you're trying to balance, like, hey, we're going to make rotations at this time because we think they're going to make a rotation at this time too, and we know that our players that we're going to rotate in, like our substitutes are going to be better than their substitutes. So like even if our first 11s are relatively evenly matched, like we know when they go to substitute, we're going to be better. So we're going to try to time that similarly, and to be able to hit them in those moments. Or maybe it's the other way around, where like, hey, you feel like maybe your first 11s, maybe our first 11 is maybe a little bit weaker than theirs, but it's going to be better than their substitutes. So can we maybe sub our first 11 earlier, so then we can put them back in when they go with their substitute bench? Like there's so many different elements to it that make it kind of crazy, hectic, but also fun too at the same time. It's a little bit different. It's the only level of the game that really is like that. So it's unique for sure.
And that's where the art, the enjoyment, and the challenges of coaching come into play, I suppose.
100%.
Absolutely. And, Zach, you've taken time out of your day to really come on the pod and really delve into the game model. And there's been some really reflective points, which has been great to have. And really, to have a sort of ping pong about answers and how you've said something and I thought about it, and then having that, which has really led to being such a great conversation. I've enjoyed every moment of it. And, as I say to every coach who's on, it's just about scratching the surface, because I know you guys got so much more in that bottle, which you just leaked out a little bit, and there's so much there. But, I really appreciate the time within the middle of your day, and especially around your schedule, and having travelled back late last night and why you've got up and coming and planning. But, all the coaches that I speak to say, it's hard to get us US coaches when the season's on, because there's so much going on for us. So I do really appreciate that, and I've got that in the back of my mind as I speak to every coach. But it has been great that we could arrange it, and it's been a fantastic time talking to you.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic being on. I really appreciate it. I love especially like all the reflection points, and I love that terminology, and it's something that like as we've been here, I've been like, like that's something I've got to like use. I've got to touch base on it, and especially use what the athletes do. And so it's been fun. I've really enjoyed the conversation as well, and yeah, I look forward to hopefully connecting again soon in the near future.
Well, absolutely, and likewise. But before you go, I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you, as I do with every coach, and I really don't want to leave you out. So, number one, if you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Oh gosh, I think energetic. I think hard working, and well, let's go competitive as well. My wife would appreciate that one.
Great choices for sure. If you can move to any country to coach, where would it be?
I think Spain. I love the Spanish game, like how it's played, especially in like the Catalonian state. I think it's just the stylistically, it's such beautiful. I'd love to dive in and to put myself in their shoes, and to be around that every day.
Brilliant, great choice. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
Marcelo Bielsa. It's unbelievable. It's just like the mentality, the how he sees the game. I think is so different and so unique. Like would love to kind of be a day, following him around and seeing how he thinks and how he sees it.
Top choice again. Who was or is your role model?
Oh gosh, I always have said I think my dad, and I think it's maybe the cop out answer, but always was my dad for sure.
No, it's a top answer. I love personal ones and ones which are close to home, etc. If you had the choice that I put in front of you 2 cards at a younger Zach, one which possesses, well, you possess the knowledge which you have now, everything, the experiences and so on, but you've got a choice of being a professional full-time coach where you're at now and being able to have the option of going to any level, any movement, any job that's out there, or being a full-time professional. Which card would you take? Professional player mind.
Yeah. No, I think saying as a professional, like the wait. Apologies. Say it one more time. That last bit threw me off. Apologies.
That's fine. No, it's fine. I didn't explain it as 2 cards. So one is professional coach and going any level, any job. One is professional soccer player, and you could be a professional any level that you wanted. So you possess the knowledge which you have now, and being a coach, etc. Both cards, but you can only pick one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think as a coach, I think is kind of where I feel. I think it's your longevity and who you are and what you are as a coach, and get to see and the impact that you get to have on people, like 100% for sure.
Top choices. What is your number 1 top tip for any coach?
Be adaptable. Be willing to learn from others and to learn and to grow. I think you can't ever be settled, as we talked about earlier. Can't be settled with where you are. The game's always adapting, and you have to as well.
Absolutely. If you had the choice of any job out there in terms of coaching, what job would it be?
Ooh. I think I would have to say it would have to be like the U.S. national team. Like I think it would just be such a different bizarre experience. Like I think of the random away trips in region to El Salvador to play in the humidity with a 40,000 people screaming at you and throwing stuff at you and whatever. But then also the balance of you being you're the U.S. and it's top of this region, but it still has a lot of catching up on the rest of the world and how the rest of the world looks at us. So I think it would be a really interesting and really fun job for sure. Not an easy one, that's definitely for sure. Though.
Definitely not easy, but an enjoyable one for sure. If you weren't coaching, what else would you be doing?
I think in one world, I would have loved to be involved with real estate, with houses. I love houses. It intrigues me a lot. So maybe something to do with houses.
Hey, there you go. One way or the other, there's definitely something interesting there, and people base for sure. Who is your all-time favorite player?
Oh, it's funny. I actually got a kind of a little bit of a later start in the game, and so like I always feel like these questions, I kind of feel like I have funny answers to, but like Mesut Ozil, I love. Like I don't think in recent. I know there have been before, but like in the time period that I really followed like the European game, like I don't know if there's a player that had more like just a little creativity, a little technical flair that he had, like just unbelievable. Some of the way that he would finish the ball back into the ground, the way that like the different surfaces that he was comfortable using. I mean, just absolute magical left foot. So I have to say Mesut Ozil.
A very underrated player for sure. Absolutely. What is your biggest pet peeve as a coach?
Oh gosh. Biggest pet peeve as a coach is definitely gosh, there's a couple of them. Man, I cannot stand like like players that what like just the oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for right now? It's like just the like unwilling, like the lack of willingness to try something new, like in training. Like that's the thing that drives me crazy the most. Like even if it's just something that's like a no pressure and no like there's nothing that's holding me back. Like there's no stakes at it. Like the lack of willingness to try something new is like my biggest pet peeve, and I think it's hard to like really get mad at the kid because I think so much of that is like societal and like all the pressures of like not failing in front of their friends or teammates, whatever, right? So it's probably a bigger conversation at the end of the day. But like it drives me crazy because I think like just as we talked about earlier, this is like the game where you're supposed to be creative and fun and free flowing and like when players like refuse to like be willing to even try something, it drives me nuts.
Absolutely. What is your favorite thing to do in your downtime?
I really enjoy. I have a 1 year old at home, and my wife and I, been married. Still a relatively short amount of time. So for us, we really enjoy just kind of nights. Just having a night to sit on the back porch. We've gotten into bought like one of those little like pizza ovens that you have at home. Just sits on a little tabletop. So like we love cooking pizza, hanging out on the back porch, and just spending time away from everything. Now, granted, usually we're both super into sports, so usually there's some sort of sports game that's on. So it sometimes ends up being on the couch rather than the back porch because we have something we have to be watching. But you don't get a lot of free time, a lot of time away, and so trying to be with family as much as you can is always important. And my wife coaches as well, so we that whole your life is busy is doubled for us. So it's definitely take the free time when you can get it and the time to be together.
I really love that. I honestly really love that answer for sure, and such a nice component to think of or element. What is one book you could recommend or would recommend?
I really like the book Grit. Right, I don't know if you've gotten across that one. I know it's been a relatively popular one, but like I think the mentality that it kind of teaches, and especially like when you talk about like the mental side of the game, I think it's super applicable to young athletes and to what they're going through and like the adversity that you face. So yeah, definitely Grit is kind of my go-to whenever I get asked this.
I will check that one out for sure. What does reflection mean to you?
Yeah, I think a reflection is an opportunity to sit and think back and to learn, to take in things that maybe you didn't know before, and to kind of understand based on the things that you've now experienced. So I love, like I said earlier, I love all the terminology, reflection points, and adding that and layering that in, as a coach and as a teacher, and those sort of things. But yeah, I think it definitely is a chance to learn from things that you've experienced.
Absolutely. What are your 3 non-negotiables?
I think you've got to be willing to learn. You've got to be willing to adapt, and you've got to be willing to work hard. I think those are the 3 for sure.
Love those top 3. And the final one, what is one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
I think I think there's 2 things, right? Like, I love competing. I love being out and being around the game and just that environment. Then I also love like the long journey of growth, right? Whether that is as a the growth in players, the growth as a team, as a program. Like, I love the journey as well.
I love that, and what a way to finish such a class episode and time spent with yourself. Well, I really appreciate those quick fire questions and appreciate you coming on once again. But what a top episode it's been, and a big thank you from me.
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
Absolutely. Well, take care, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Yeah, you as well. Have a good one.
And you. See you.
A chance to reflect. It gives them a chance to kind of flush out emotions, flush out like also sometimes like the stress. If you're going 7 days a week for whatever the college season is, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 14 weeks long, that can be a lot on you mentally. It can be exhausting. It can be draining. Having those days off, I think, are important. As much as I love to get out and just teach and coach and every single day, like, you need that day to flush everything out. And I think it does. It gives them that extra chance too, just to physically recover too, especially when you've got a lot of travel, whether we're flying or whether we're driving on a Sunday, right? Like, that's a lot on your legs. Like, it's not comfortable to sit and travel for 5-6 hours on a day. So then asking them to turn around and be ready to train today, it is kind of silly. And like for us, even our, like when we're away, it's like this week, for example, right? We drove 5 hours on Wednesday. We played Thursday night at 7 p.m. Friday, we didn't train. We gave them a chance to do some extra recovery with our athletic trainer. They did, got the Normatex out, rolled, band, stretch, like all of that sort of stuff, a little bit of yoga, right? And kind of give them a chance to just flush everything out of their body physically, rather than just getting on the bus again to go train somewhere again. And we played on artificial turf on Thursday night, so it's even more taxing on your body, right? So I think it's a lot of that, like, kind of almost swallowing your pride as a coach a little bit, and just not going out and just actually coaching and training every single day. It's doing what's best for the longevity of the season too.